Okay, the first thing we're going to do at the beginning of this DVD is talk about the new R3 features. Part 1 came out just before R3 was released, so it was mostly based on the R2 ZBrush 3 release, 3.5 release. It opens up a lot like R2 did, and you've got your lightbox here, and you've got your sphere. So what we can do is, to turn this lightbox off, you can go ahead and click this lightbox button, or hit Shift-Z. I don't know if I went over this in Part 1 or not, but under Preferences, you can go to Lightbox, and you can unclick Open at Launch, if you don't want the lightbox to pop open every time you open up ZBrush. To get rid of the sphere, you can go into go out of edit mode by hitting T or clicking out of edit mode and hitting Control N to clear your canvas. You might have noticed when we were looking at the lightbox that there's a new Quicksketch button. So let's go ahead and hit Quicksketch, and we'll talk about that for a little bit. And it'll give you a confirmation thing that Quicksketch setup has been completed. You can just click in your canvas to get rid of that. With our Quicksketch initialized, let's go ahead and just drag on our canvas here. And you'll notice it's just kind of like you're drawing on a gray piece of paper, and it's got symmetry turned on. And basically what you're doing is you've got a polymesh 3D plane that was made, and it was subdivided. If you go under geometry, it was subdivided 5 times, so you can actually step down through and you can actually see your poly paint. So basically you're just poly painting on a plane, and anything that you can do in ZBrush you can actually do to this plane. Quicksketch just kind of sets up kind of a nice template for you to start just drawing out your ideas. So we've got a pin shadow brush up here, which is a new brush that's in 3.5, and we've got our dot stroke with this alpha, this texture. The flat color is actually applied to the plane. We've got RGB on, so no Z add, and our RGB intensity is at 42. If you want to clear your canvas, what you can do is go out here to this gray color and hit C, and of course that'll select this color out here, and you can go to Color and Fill Object. And because we had a texture on it, actually filled it with that texture. So we'll go ahead and undo that. Make sure that texture is off. So with this gray color selected, we can go to Color, Fill Object. And because our RGB intensity was at 42, it didn't fill it completely. If you want to fill it completely, you can crank that up to 100. However, if you were just sketching and you want to just kind of lighten that sketch and then kind of draw over it just to kind of refine it, you can do that too. You can just keep hitting Fill Object until it gets as light as you want it to. Then you can go in here and you can refine this. Make sure you grab a dark stroke again. And with that texture off, we can actually select another color. You can draw different colors. And again, because this is a polyplane, you can actually, if you turn on Z add, let's turn off RGB, you can't really tell the deformations it's making because we have a flat color. But if we make this flat color a basic material, you can actually see we're deforming that geometry. If we go out here to this safe zone, we can actually tumble that polyplane that we're painting on, and you'll see we're actually pulling those polygons away from the surface. So if you want to snap back, you go out here and you can tumble and then hold down Shift. That'll snap it to the front again. So while you're painting, just keep in mind, especially if you're on the flat color, that if you choose another brush that has Z-Add on, you are going to be deforming the surface of the geometry. Like I mentioned before, we're using the new Pin Shadow brush, which is up here. So if you click on this brush menu, you'll see these letters at the top of the screen, and that's a cool new selection method that R3 has. So if you click this P, that'll bring up all the brushes that start with P. If you click C, that'll be all your brushes that start with C. Probably the fastest way to select brushes in R3 right now is we'll go ahead and exit out of this brush menu. Anywhere where you have your cursor, if you hit B, that'll bring up the brush menu wherever your cursor is. So that's pretty handy. So if you hit B, and let's say we want to look at those new pin brushes that they have. So we can actually, on our keyboard, hit P, and that'll bring our selection up to any of the brushes that start with P. And since all the pin brushes start with P for pin, they're all right here. And if you actually want to select one of these, you can go down here and select it like this, or what you can do is, you see these little orange letters? That'll actually correspond to these brushes. So if you wanted to do pin dots, you can hit D, which is that orange letter, and that'll select pin dots. Then you can actually draw with that. So again, B, and then hit P, and then you can hit S for pin shadow sliver, and you can use that brush. That's a great new way to select your brushes. Of course, you can still go in here and go down to your standard brush, and you can control click and assign that to whatever key combination you want. I assigned it to Alt S. But again, you can also go B, S for standard, and then B for the standard brush because it's got that orange B. And then you've got the standard brush. Let's go ahead and clear our canvas. We'll go out here to our canvas and we'll hit C to grab this neutral gray color. We've got our RGB and the standard brush cranked up to 100. So we'll go to Color, Fill Object, and let's go ahead and talk about the symmetry. Right now you've probably noticed that we're actually we've actually been painting in symmetry. Where that is like we talked about in part 1, is up here under your transform menu. Right now we have activate symmetry on in X, and you can turn it on in X and Y. You can also toggle activate symmetry using the X key. So if I hit X, that'll toggle it off. I'll hit X again and that'll toggle it back on. But under transform, let's go ahead and turn on X and Y symmetry. Now you can actually sketch in X and Y symmetry. If you want to, you can go under transform and you can turn on Z, and we'll turn off X and Y, and then we'll turn on R, which is our radial symmetry. And right now it's radial counts on at 8. Of course, you can go up here to transform and you can crank that up if you want to. And you can turn on different colors. So that's radial symmetry. We've been using the standard brush, which has RGB on it. It's also got Z add on. So I forgot to turn that off. So if we go into our basic material, you'll see we're actually deforming that surface. To get rid of that, what you could have done is when you first started Quicksketch is maybe store a morph target. It should be down underneath here. If you've got a nice clean canvas on subdivision level 5, if you store a morph target, you can use your morph brush just to morph those geometry deformations back. I didn't do that, so what we're going to have to do is I'm going to hold down C, and then we're going to go to color, fill object, so we can just see our deformations. One thing we can do is go to the deformation menu, and under size, we're going to turn off X and Y, and we're just going to have Z. We're going to crank that down to -100 until all of our deformations actually go back down to nothing. What that's doing is making the size deformations in Z, which is the plane facing outwards, back down to just the flat surface. Or what you could do, if you don't mind losing any of your changes, you can just hit Quicksketch again, and that'll reinitialize another polyplane for you to start with. Now we're back in our default Quicksketch setup. So you can go ahead and just sketch a little bit. And again, because it's a polyplane, let's go in here and grab our move brush. Go ahead and set that to Alt-W hotkey. So hit Alt-W. With the move brush selected, you can actually deform geometry, kind of like the liquefy in Photoshop. Now you just got to keep in mind that you're actually deforming that geometry with the move brush. So, use it sparingly, I guess. But you can use that as part of your arsenal as well as painting with different materials, painting with different colors. You can paint with different textures. Any of the poly painting stuff that I showed you in part 1 will actually apply to this polygon plane. Of course, that also applies to masking as well. With our standard brush, let's go into drag rect, and we'll grab an alpha. And holding down Control, let's drag that out onto our canvas, and we'll Control click to invert it, and then we'll turn off that alpha, go into freehand, and we can just go ahead and paint inside that mask. And then under your masking menu, you can do all sorts of things with that. We'll go ahead and just clear our mask. So you can use masks to mask things out, as well as just holding down Control. You can mask areas, and then you can clear your mask. So any of the ZBrush tools are actually available to you as you work in Quicksketch. Once you've made a quick sketch that you want to work with, you can actually start drawing out your Z-spheres and Z-sketching right away. But before we do that, let's talk about a couple of different ways to save this thing off. The first and most obvious way is just to save it out as a Z tool, because again, all this is a polyplane with a polypaint on it. So it'll save all this for you. You can also do a texture, and do a grab doc. That'll make a texture out of this entire document window. And if you wanted to, you could also go into the texture menu and select make alpha. It'll throw up here in the alpha channel, and you can go in here and you can invert it and bump up the contrast to get rid of that gray. And then you can use this thing as a brush alpha or any sort of stencil alpha that you want to. Like I said before, once you get your quick sketch the way you like it, you can actually go ahead and start Z-sketching right on top of that. What you need to do first is just go ahead and zoom out so we can see this whole polyplane. And again, like I said, since it's a polyplane, you can actually, if you're drawing and you want to zoom in or pan around, you can do that just using your simple navigation techniques that we talked about in part 1. But we got our polyplane here, and what we're going to need to do is bring in a Z-sphere so we can actually start sketching. So we'll go ahead and go out of edit mode, hit Control-N to clear our canvas, and we'll go into simple brush, and we'll grab a Z-sphere, we'll grab our polyplane again, open up the subtool menu, and we'll go ahead and just pen that Z-sphere we just made, and draw those back out. And we'll select the Z-sphere because we want to edit the Z-sphere. I'd also like to be able to see my drawing behind that Z-sphere. In order to do that, we need to turn on transparency, which is this button right down here, activate edit opacity. So we'll go ahead and hit transparency, And unfortunately, with this ghost option on, it's going to turn our poly paint into a rectangle. So we need to go ahead and turn that off so we can actually see the drawing behind there. And with the Z-sphere selected, go ahead and scale this down using the techniques we talked about in part 1. And with this one, under transform, go ahead and activate your symmetry. If I have it activated in X, it's going to want to draw a Z-sphere over here as well. So we're going to activate it in Z, actually, which is going to turn symmetry on in this direction. So you can actually go and make sure you're in draw mode. You can actually, as soon as it turns green, you can draw a new Z-sphere off of that one. And again, you go ahead and start moving these around if you want to. However, you don't even need to do that if you don't want to. Instead of drawing out these Z-spheres, what I'm going to do is I'm going to have this one created. Then I'm going to hit Shift A. That's going to go into Z sketch mode. And I think we'll still be in, yeah, Z symmetry. You can actually just start Z sketching right away. Oops. Make sure you're in draw mode. And we'll use the Z sketch 1 brush first. We'll hit Shift A. We're in draw mode. And then you can just start Z sketching right away your little creature. Again, using the techniques that we already talked about in part 1, the Z-sketch techniques. And you can spend as much time as you'd like building up your Z-sketch. And this is going to act as your base mesh once you get it to a certain point. Go ahead and grab that armature brush. We'll dangle some limbs off of them. Smooth those back into the body here. Drop some tentacles out of his mouth here. Now, go to the other side. Here's our Z sketch. And again, if you hit A, that'll bring it into the unified skin mode. And there's your base mesh that you can start sculpting with. Just using the default options, obviously. So it's just that fast to go in here and make a quick sketch and then start Z sketching your creature out and modifying it from there.